All those tours are free to join, but the only money we get as a guide, it is straight from your generosity. So thank you very much in advance if you are in a position to do so. And without further ado, let's go. So welcome to Lyon. We've got two amazing rivers in Lyon. They actually meet in Lyon. It's like a Y. So this is the Rhône, and we'll see later on through the tour, we'll see the Saône. Everything is gendered in France or in French language. So the rivers, they have a sex as well. The Rhône is masculine. So it's Le Rhône. That's a male river. The second river we'll see tonight is La Saône. So it's a lady river. And La Saône, she goes into the Rhône. Then they become the Rhône. Lyon, how do you tell the difference? Well, Tish, it's just because we say le or la, but personally, I've not checked their genitalia. I think they might be the same type of rivers, but yeah. Anyway, we are by the Pont de la Guillotière. Le Pont de la Guillotière, it's the oldest bridge in Lyon. And there have been a few disasters on the bridge. The first one was in 1190. It was not the same bridge, but, the same place. We had, you might remember Richard the Lionhearted, the King of England, but he was not very popular in England because he was never in England. He was always in France. And he crossed over the bridge with the King of France, I think Philippe Auguste, his name was. And the two, plus their men, of course, they were on their way to the Crusades. They crossed the bridge, and the bridge collapsed. And Richard the Lionhearted, he told the local monks, the religious, they were like, oh, don't worry, just go and beg for money in England. Just tell them I've broken the bridge, and they'll pay for a new bridge. So technically, the old bridge was partially financed by England. That's why he was not very popular up there. Anyway, so that was the first disaster. And there was another one, very sadly, in 1710, if I remember right. It's known as La Bousculade de la Guillotière. There was a horse carriage. At the time, the bridge was quite skinny, and there was an accident with a horse carriage, a lady that was called Madame de Serviente, and people kept coming on the bridge, hundreds of them, and they were pushing, hoping to go through. And we've already spoken about, We've already spoken about that before. If you followed my tour where we talked about the Bethnal Green disaster, if you have masses of people pushing, that's, we call it vertical stacking. People are being pressed against one another and they cannot physically breathe anymore. They're being crushed because their rib cage cannot open. 241 people died. 16 of them were drowned because they preferred to jump. So horrible disaster, and a very stupid one, just people pushing on a bridge. Madame de Serviente, she was a lady, from aristocracy. After the accident, she donated all her fortune to charity because she felt ever so sorry. Quite a few tragedies. And, it was also the spot where in the 1850s, a terrible serial killer was hunting for his victims. According to the magistrate, that serial killer could have killed up to 648 ladies. Yes, you've heard this right. 648. There's no evidence of any of that, but we do know that he's killed a few. Le Pont de la Guillotière was a meeting place if you wanted to find a maid. If you were from a big family in a mansion or anything and you wanted a new maid, they had a little spot here where they could meet. And there was, very sadly, a gentleman called Martin Dumollard. Dumollard, it's a disgusting name. A molar in French. It's there's no traduction in English, I'm afraid, but it's basically a spat word. But a disgusting one, because a normal spat, it's a crachat. A molar, it's, if you're really, really sick and you go, that's a molar. So Dumollard, it's a horrible name anyway. And what happened, it's that one day, 1855, the body of a lady, naked, was found in the wood, 20 kilometers outside of Lyon here. And at the time, the magistrate decided that it might be a good idea to take a photograph to be able to identify her. So, if you followed my Jack the Ripper tour, I might have told you that Mary Jane Kelly was one of the first crime scene photographers of history. Well, yeah, it depends what you call a crime scene photograph. Because they did not take the photo of the lady on the spot, they brought the body back to London. And what is the White Tower on the left bank? Oh, well, I don't know what they do. There's a swimming pool there, but I don't know what's up the towers, I'm afraid. Sorry. And so, yeah, they took the lady and they replaced the body like in the crime scene in front of a church, actually. The photo is on Wikipedia, but I've chosen not to show you the photo because I honestly don't think it's really okay to do that. Anyway, that was a good idea that the magistrate did that, because about a year later, a young maid was declared missing, and the family was then able to identify her because of that very photograph. So that was 1855, but through those very months and years, quite a few ladies actually had gone to the police complaining that they had been approached here on the bridge, on the Guillotière Bridge, by a gentleman, a big guy with a beard and a big lip. And he, the way they described him was a bit like an ogre in a fairy tale. And because those ladies were made, at the time the class system was really important. And very sadly, working class people were often not taken very serious. Yes, Shrek. Well, that's the thing. Because they described him like Shrek, the police didn't take them seriously. They were like, yeah, right, you're describing an ogre in a fairy tale, So several of those complaints arrived to the police, but they didn't really do much about it. And by the way, this beautiful building here, this is l'Hôtel Dieu. It used to be a hospital. Now it is. There's a museum inside, as well as some venues and hotel and stuff. And so yeah, the police, the different little town were all getting complaints, and eventually, one girl, her name was Marie Pichon. She also met someone on the bridge here. She was a maid. And the guy told her he had to find a maid for a mansion a bit further down the forest. And he had to find a maid today and bring her back. Very good money. We're talking 200 francs, whatever that meant at the time. And so the young lady went to grab all her stuff, everything she owned in some kind of a box. And then she ventured into the forest with the ogre. Let me show you his photo, Martin Dumollard. Where is he? So that's Dumollard there. And well, in the middle of the forest, suddenly he completely changed his attitude and he attacked her. He tried to strangle her with a rope. He was trying not to have it too bloody, because he would sell the items of clothing. That was his motive. So that's why strangling was a good option for him, because if there was too much blood on the items of clothing, he couldn't sell them. And that very case was actually too close to Dumollard's address, and finally the police reacted. On many of the witnesses, they described a big man with big hands and a blue top, often a blue top. But on all the witnesses' account, and there were quite a few already that managed to escape, they all said that he had a big lip, or a scar on the lip. There was something very peculiar with his lip. and someone said, "Oh, that must be Raymond Dumollard." And his name was actually Martin, but somehow they used to call him by the name of his dead brother. Yes, that lady escaped. Yeah, that very one, Marie Pichon, she escaped. So the police went to Dumollard's address where he lived with his wife, Marie-Anne, and as they entered the property, they found hundreds and hundreds of items of clothing from ladies. We're talking 72 handkerchiefs, many dresses and jackets, and all of that folded very neatly, classified by size and by state. Some of them were a bit bloody and hard to sell, and they also found 2 items from little boys. Horrendous. And Marie Pichon, she found her clothes. So that was very, very incriminating for the couple. And originally, he was not the sharpest tool in the box, Martin. But his wife, she pretended she didn't know what he was up to. He was bringing lovely items of clothing and she would sell them, but she had no idea. No, she didn't know. How would she know anyway? And they were tried. Dumollard had actually accepted to bring them to the location of 3 bodies. So he had pretty much confessed, and then, exactly. When he was caught, it's 61. So there's a gap of like 5 years between the first body and when they had him in custody. His wife, she kind of looked like she knew the location of some of the bodies, so she had kind of incriminated herself as well. She was sentenced to 20 years of penal servitude, which was pretty much a death sentence as well. At the time, we already started to have a few people that were completely against the death penalty, so they decided not to guillotine her, but Dumollard was guillotined in his village just outside of Lyon. And he had a glass of wine. It was like 8 a.m, and then he was guillotined with an audience of 2,000 people, really. And his body was buried in a cemetery, but in the middle of the path, because they wanted people to step on him. His head was given to the School of Anatomy here in Lyon, and they used his skull on his face to practice, facial reconstitution. When they try to identify a face from a skull. Other people fishing? Oh, maybe. I've not seen anyone fishing, but I suppose you probably could. So yeah, horrible story. Let me show you his face, because what they did is they did a face mask of his face, and then they stuck the leather, so his skin, that's his actual skin, that was leathered, and they stuck it on the face mask. So the head is still visible in Lyon Museum. So yeah, horrible serial killer, and that's one of our first, probably our first modern serial killer in Western Europe, at least. We had one. If you followed my tours in Brittany, we spoke about one in the 14th century, but that was not the same MO, really. Anyway, this is a beautiful piece of art here. It's called Flower Tree. It's from an artist. He's Korean. And that's quite cool. Unfortunately, they might move it because somehow they think it's obstructing the view. So they might... Yes, exactly, Stefan. They were only murdered for their clothing. But you'd have to remember that in the 19th century, items of clothing were much more valuable than today. And, those maids, they would carry with them everything they had. So there were a few jewelry items or maybe a little bit of money, but really not much, because they were maids, they were struggling with money in general. And so very sad. And talking about those maids, life was very unfair in the 19th century. I think it's pretty much the same all over Europe. And very often those maids were abused or raped, or sometimes they started a relationship with their employer, and they often fell pregnant, and then they would become what we called fallen ladies. And there were so many of those maids around here falling pregnant. See the little tower in the middle? That belongs to that's the last tower remaining from Hôpital de la Charité. So that was a place with nuns, and you could come and drop your baby. And there were so many babies being dropped here at the Hôpital de la Charité that they had some kind of a rotating box. So a wooden rotating box. You could drop the baby in the box and ring the bell. Then you'll rotate it. So the nuns inside, they would not see your face, and they'll come and collect the baby from you. Yeah, those poor children. Would he have been less crazy if he had killed them for any other reasons? Well, Richard, you know what? If we're talking about the making of a serial killer, Dumollard, his story, let me tell you a bit about his background, because really, you almost feel bad for him. As a child, his dad was actually Hungarian, and he was a bit of a criminal in Hungary, a former noble, but that had lost all his money. And he had tried to plot to kill the Austrian emperor. So he had run away to hide in France. Dumollard is not their real name. They changed it to look a bit more French. And they recognized him from a portrait. So he ran to Italy, and actually the Hungarians, they caught him, and they decided to execute him. So as Dumollard was a child, he watched his dad being quartered. We've spoken about quartering people in some of my tours before. His leg was attached to a horse, second leg to a second horse, arm to two different horses. Usually they would tell the horses to go 4 different directions, and that would quarter them. But there was not enough space on that little square in Italy, so that did not work. All his joints popped, in all of them. And the little boy would have been there 2 or 3 years old, seeing his dad being killed in such a gruesome way. And then because they didn't manage to quarter him with the horses, they came with an axe and they finished him off. So, and then the boy at the age of 5 was sent to work as a shepherd. 5, imagine that. If you've read Les Miserables, Les Mis with what's her name? Is it Colette, the little girl? Cosette. Actually, in Les Miserables, Victor Hugo, he does mention Dumollard, because it's really, and then he met that girl, that maid that he married. She seemed to be quite into her money, so he probably was just killing to please his wife, to feed his wife and please his wife, and I'm not giving him excuses, but when you have a childhood like that, yeah. Anyway, let's move on to a bit of a more fun story, really. Up there at number 7, I'm not sure which level, but there used to be an amazing gynecologist. In the 1940s, there was a gynecologist here. He was Carole Martin Dumollard. Mollard is perfect, but there's a Dumollard. Yeah. An amazing gynecologist. His name was Jean Rousseau, if I remember right. He was a resistant. Lyon is extremely proud. I mean, France in general is quite proud of the resistance. So for the ones that don't know, the resistance with a capital C, it is when France was invaded by the Nazi. France was invaded in 6 weeks. People all over the country found different ways to fight the German, although officially here in Lyon, we were free until 1942. It was called Vichy France, but that was basically a puppet state of the Nazi. There was collaboration. So French people are really proud of this movement of resistance. And, even at school in France, I was taught, I studied World War II several times because I've skipped a year of school. So I've never studied Napoleon stuff, but World War II, oh my God, did I study. Never was I taught about the amazing British agent that sparked the resistance. Without the spies that were infiltrated in the country from Britain, the resistance would have never ever worked. Across the river earlier, we saw a big building. It was the University Jean Moulin. Jean Moulin was a resistant that was managed by de Gaulle. There were actually a bit of competition between de Gaulle and between the SOE, Secret Operation Executive, in London, in Baker Street. But yeah, there were some amazing British agents that were dropped on the territory. And I'll tell you a bit more about one of them, Virginia Hall. But to come back to the gynecologist, at the time, the sex workers, they had to have a green card. So they'll have to be inspected every so often for STDs. And then they could operate if they had a green card. So Jean would look for the prostitutes that had syphilis or gonorrhea. He would not treat them quite yet. He would give them a green card so they would go and have sex with the Nazi and the SS officer or the Vichy police to contaminate them with gonorrhea and syphilis. And then the sex worker would come back and get treated. And not only, so there was a maison close with a madame, Germaine. Germaine, she was, a pimp. She's an amazing lady, Germaine. So she would, basically, when she had any, that sounds a bit weird, but the Nazi officer, they were recommended to go to see the prostitutes for motivation, to keep them running. And Germaine, she would get her prostitutes to get the SS officers drunk or high. They were sometimes trying to get them addicted to heroin. And as they were high or passed out, they would then look into their pockets, copy down the information. Of course, they didn't speak German. They would just copy down whatever information and then give it to the spies. And sometimes they used to put itching powder in their underwear as well to make them feel even worse. Amazing gynecologist and an amazing, there were many different ways of resisting the German. And that's what Germaine and Jean were doing. Both of them were caught and they ended up in concentration camp. Germaine was caught and she was shaven everywhere, head and genitalia, and she was exposed naked through the street. Anyway, if you see just down there, there's not much to see, but there's a little cafe there. It's called Café de la Cloche. La Cloche is a bell because of the bell in the building behind me, the bell to give the drop babies. Let's get back into the resistance. So Jean, as well as Germaine, they were able to resist. The name of the gynecologist, his name was Jean, so Jean, Rousset, Rousset, Jean Rousset. So Jean Rousset worked very closely with Virginia Hall. Virginia, she's an amazing lady. I think she's probably one of the best spies of history. She was originally from Baltimore. She was born in a fairly rich family. She was expected to marry a rich man and probably not even work. But Virginia, she was a bit of a tomboy, and she used to come into Europe on holidays, really. And she spoke many languages. She studied in Europe. She loved France because France, between the wars, France in the 20s, it was proper fun. That's why the French were not ready for war. We called it les années folles. Basically, French people spent about 20 years partying. And at the time in France, ladies could wear whatever they wanted. We had a style called the garçon. So that was ladies wearing trousers, which was very Parisian, really. So Virginia probably loved that because she was a bit of a tomboy herself. And she wanted to work as a diplomat. And she spoke like 6 languages. She always had an American accent, but she was fluent. She was rejected by the United States as a diplomat, probably because, well, there were very few ladies in those type of jobs at the time. But she did get a job for the embassies in different. She was in Poland for a while. Then she took a job in the embassy in Turkey. And one day she went hunting, and her gun was loaded. She tripped on a wire and shoot her own foot. She thought it was going to be okay at the beginning. She went to hospital and then she caught gonorrhea. Gonorrhea? No. How do you call it? Gangrene. You don't get an STD in your foot. Is it gangrene? Yeah. Anyway, they had to. Yeah, exactly. She's known as the limping lady of Lyon. So they had to chop her foot down. And she had some kind of a prosthetic leg. She called it catpert. Well, that would have been very uncomfortable. Even today, people with a prosthetic limb, sometimes they're still in pain, So imagine the ones from the beginning of the century. And she applied again to be a diplomat. And they said, no, we're not taking any amputees. Sorry. So then she stayed in her position. Then she got a job in Venice at the embassy again. Venice, it's full of steps everywhere. It's a nightmare if you are slightly disabled. So she bought her own gondola. So then she wouldn't have to take the steps. She'll be just on her boat. And eventually World War II broke out. She didn't have to stay in Europe. The United States were not into the war yet, but she wanted to stay on help. She decided to apply for the French army as an ambulance driver. Of course, she did not tell them that she had a disability. So they took her on board as a driver for an ambulance. And, France was invaded very quickly. So then she had to go. She escaped through Spain. And in Spain, she met on the train, she met a British, well, she didn't know at the time, but he was a secret agent. And because she told him her story and how determined she was and how she wanted to save France, he's given her a telephone number. And he was like, oh, when you reach London, you might want to go and have dinner with that person. He didn't say anything much. It turned up that he had given her the contact from the SOE recruiter. The SOE, so the Secret Operation Executive, that was a very new service that had been created by Churchill himself we call them spy, but it was much more than spies. They were the ferry wheel. Yeah, this is the Place Bellecour. That's like a little London Eye. I've not done it. I think it's like €25 or something. So I was like, no, thank you. So we call them spy, but really what they did is sabotage. So they wanted to attack the Nazis in their conquered territory. So to cut down the train line or sabotage the factories. So they were gathering intelligence, and their job was to spike the spirit of resistance. Because clearly, before people like Virginia, there was no resistance. Of course, French people wanted to do something, but they had no guns, they had no money. Virginia's job was to recruit those people, like Jean, like Germaine. So, for her, it was quite, she ended up working with a sex worker. She didn't imagine that before, but these type of people were amazing, and they all wanted to help in their own little way. So Virginia would orchestrate, for example, parachute drops, money, guns coming from England. And she helped massively. She was one of the first officers to be sent. She was definitely the first lady. At the time, no one believed a disabled lady could do such an amazing job. And when she got to Lyon, she recruited, Germaine, Jean, one of the head office of the police here actually worked with her. That was a very dangerous job because a lot of people in France were collaborating. And if you gave a secret agent to the Gestapo, you'll be paid quite a good amount of money by the Gestapo. Same for people hiding Jews. Jean, actually, the gynecologist, he used to hide Jews and spies, but again, very, very risky. Um, and she started to be known as the limping lady, and of course, it's quite noticeable, you know. So for a spy, you don't want to be that easily noticed, but she was really good at. Disguising herself and changing her clothes and just being discreet. To give you an idea, as she got here, 12 male agents, 12 of them, they had the stupid idea to meet up. And that was infiltrated. The 12 of them were arrested. They were taken to prison down south. She orchestrated a release. She managed to get the 12 of them out of prison. She smuggled in a priest that was on a wheelchair with a radio on the wheelchair, and they paid the guard. I mean, there was a massive shame for the Gestapo. 12 agents out of prison. She became an expert in prison escapes, really. An incredible lady. I mean, you know, some of those files are still closed, so we don't really know how much those spies have done, but really amazing. And eventually, though, she was betrayed. She was usually, you know, there were a lot of double agents. Whenever the Gestapo used to find an agent, they would try to convince them to become double agents to save their own skin. And very sadly, sometimes it worked. There was a priest called Alech. Alech had a bit of a German accent. He was from Luxembourg. So Virginia did not trust him, but he was backed up by London. Baker Street was like, no, he's a good man. He was a priest, and he used to do in his sermon at church, he used to be discreetly resistant. So he would get people coming to him. And very sadly, he completely infiltrated the network in London. And as Virginia came back when she was down south to free those 12 men, Alech had literally snitched on everybody. Germaine was arrested. By the way, guys, if you know anyone in Hollywood, they are doing a movie at the moment on the life of Virginia Hall. So if you know anyone in Hollywood, can you tell them I should play Germaine? Because I think I'll do a very good German. So just let them know. I think she probably was about my age anyway, so that'll be good. So yeah, they all those guys got arrested, and Virginia. I mean, Baker Street wanted Virginia to come back to London months earlier, but she was like, "No, I'm staying." And eventually, the Gestapo had everything. Her photo was in all the train station. Everyone knew who she was, and she was known as Brigitte, she was known as Marie, but, you know, the limping lady. You might have heard of Klaus Barbie. Klaus Barbie was the worst Gestapo officer ever. He's also known as the Butcher of Lyon. He sent at least 4,000 people to their death. He tortured all the agents, and he spotted an orphanage where they were hiding 44 Jewish kids. Their parents had already been sent to the concentration camp. Well, he had the 44 of them killed. Horrible, horrible men. Later on, he ended up being hired by the forerunner of the CIA, but that's a different story. A story for a different day. Anyway, Klaus Barbie, he heard about the limping lady. He used to call her the Canadian beep. She's not Canadian, but Barbie did not believe that anyone from the United States could speak very good French and so many languages. So, and he was obsessed by Virginia, but he simply could not catch her. And eventually she had to go. She just couldn't. Everyone was after her. So she had to escape by what we called the Freedom Trail. So she went through the Pyrenees. To give you an idea, it's an extremely difficult trail in the snow. even for a person that's fully able, it's extremely hard. So imagine with a prosthetic leg, Cuthbert. Apparently, she radioed London and she told them that Cuthbert was giving her trouble, and whoever was at Baker Street was new, and they replied, "If Cuthbert is giving you trouble, eliminate them." But that's her leg. She called her leg Cuthbert. Anyway, so she managed to go all over across the mountain in the snow, climbing really hard with her leg, and sadly, as she got to Spain, she was spotted in a train with the other agent. They looked very rough because they had been climbing the mountains. So she was arrested by the Spanish police. Spain was neutral at that point, but they arrested them for crossing the border illegally. And eventually she managed to get out of prison in Spain using the US Embassy. So she got back to London. She went back to SOE. Well done, well done. She could have ended up there. She's done an amazing job, but she wanted to go back. And the SOE was like, no way, no. You are, at the time they would have said brûlé. Brûlé is burned. So they say you burned in France. You cannot go back. So she was like, okay. By that point, the United States had joined the war effort, and they had created the OSS. So this is the one of the forerunner of the CIA. It stands for what is OSS? Office of Strategic Services. And the OSS, they had heard of her as an amazing agent. So they said, okay. And they gave her the best disguise ever. She went back first she trained as a radio operator, and then she went back as a milk lady. They hired some Hollywood makeup artist to teach her how to do wrinkles, to make her look like 20 years older than she was. So then she had an excuse to be limping because, of course, she was very old. They had a London dentist that grinned her teeth. So they destroyed her teeth because she had the beautiful white American smile. So she had to look like an older French lady with terrible teeth. And she went back to France. And as a milk lady, she already knew how to deal with animals because of, she had a farm in Baltimore. And she was selling milk to the German on the roads and stuff. And because, of course, she spoke a decent German, she was then able to collect information again. And at that point in France, they had created the, what is it called? Service du Travail Obligatoire. STO. So basically all the Frenchmen had to go, on some ladies as well, they had to go and be slaved in Germany. So the men that did not want to go, they were hiding in the forest. We call it the maquis. So they were much more resistant. So Virginia was hiding. She was called the Madonna of the Mountain. She was hiding in the mountain with the men, orchestrating against, parachute drops, to bring them guns and munitions and bombs and chocolate as well. They used to parachute a bit of chocolate, so they'll have some good spirit. And hold on, let me be careful here because there's no more pavement. 1 second. Yes, we are safe. So yeah, amazing. And she basically freed Haute-Loire. Haute-Loire is a department that's quite, it's very good for parachute because there are planes and stuff. And that was one of the first departments to be freed from the Nazis. And of course, everything she did kind of helped gathering intelligence to help with D-Day, basically. So amazing agent. After the war, she was given the Croix de Guerre on the what's the equivalent in America? The Good Services. Military conduct, but she wanted to have it secret because she still wanted to be an agent. So she did not want, Nathalie, I was going to ask what happened to the priest. So Terry, the priest, oh, he's a proper bee. So I told you Germaine was arrested. Germaine, she had, as a pimp, she had a lot of money, a lot of gold. Alash, the priest, he went to steal all the money from Germaine's flat. Germaine was, she was, eventually she was rescued from the concentration camp, but when she came back to her flat, everything was missing. So they tried to track down Alèche, but I don't think they ever found him because he had so much money. He went back to Paris, but then I think he kind of vanished with all Germaine's money. So yeah, and. So yeah, Virginia, she got all her medals, but very discreetly. Her mum was the only one to be there. And because she wanted to be an agent, so she didn't want to be in the public eye, you know. And she had found love at the very end of the operations. The OSS, they parachuted two more agents to help her. One of them was half French, half American, and they fell in love. He was a bit younger than her, and she was the boss. You know, he was just there to help, and yeah, they found love and they moved back to the United States. His name was Paul. And eventually, when the CIA was created a few years later, she ended up being one of the first female to work for the CIA. But to be completely honest, she was not given a good job. She was, it was almost insulting, you know, because after all she had done, she was treated like a disabled lady, really, at the time, you know, and given a desk job. So she was never really fully happy again after the war. Anyway, we are now by the second river. So this is the Saône. So this is the Lady River. This is La Saône. And on the west side of the Saône, this is the old town. So Lyon is the third city in France after Paris and Marseille. Well, it's not much behind Marseille. Let me show you a little. Oh, actually, I've not shown you Virginia. There is Virginia, and there's a lovely portrait of her with her radio. And so yeah, those radios were really big as well, kind of really hard to hide. So yeah, Lyon is the third French city. Oh, let me catch up with the chat. I've missed a few comments. Oh, was Alèche arrested? Oh, good. I never knew that. I know they searched for him for a while, but yeah. Oh, good to know. Hold on. Let me see. If that's at least spell my name right. I'm not sure I understand the message, Tamara. I'm not sure I get it. Anyway, so yeah, let me show you Lyon. So to give you an idea, the building on the hill, it's the Basilique Notre-Dame de Frouvières. It's an amazing basilique. You can go up there with a funicular. So to give you an idea, this is the population in France by cities. So you can see it's very much all concentrated in Paris. The two next cities are, of course, Lyon and Marseille, but it's much smaller. And if you looked, for example, at Germany, it's much more balanced there. Here in France, it's, everyone is pretty much in Paris. And is the city in the NE Lille? Yes, that would be Lille, yeah, the one at the top, yeah. So Lyon, it's actually an old Roman city. It used to be called Lugdunum in Roman times. The god Lug was the god of ravens. There's an old myth that says that the ravens chosen the location of the city, and they used Lug. It's a Celtic god. You might know the Romans. They used to do what we call assimilation. So they would use Celtic god and goddesses and pretend they were the same as their own, like they've done in Bath with the goddess Celis, and so that's why they used Lug, and Lugdunum became Lunen, then Linden, and eventually it became Lyon. There's a little myth that's probably not true at all that actually says that Lyon is named after a lion, but they changed the Y, the I into a Y because of the shape of the two rivers. But that's not true. Well, as far as I know, it's not true. But yeah, let me see. Is that a rune on the right? I'm not sure which one, but no, it's not. It's not a rune. It's just the old town. So it will suddenly look much older. Where is the square? Oh, that's that one. That's a bit more north. Yeah, we won't see that one tonight, Dolores. So Lyon is also famous for Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. Well, no, he's one of the famous figures in Lyon. Saint-Exupéry, that's the guy that wrote the Little Prince. The Little Prince. It's behind us now. Hold on, let me see. I don't see any ruins now. The Little Prince, I don't know if you guys knew, but it is the second most translated book in the world after the Bible. I never realized that until yesterday. Yes, the Lumiere brother as well, the guys that invented cinema. They were from here, but the actual first movie was filmed in La Ciotat, where I'm from, next to Marseille. So yeah, Saint-Exupéry, he actually lived in New York. When he wrote The Little Prince, he wrote it in New York through the Second World War, actually. He's also a war hero. So the Little Prince was actually published in English way before. It was only published in French after his death. As you might know, he was a pilot. Cindy, I can try to zoom, but the quality is not going to be great at night. So Saint-Exupéry, he came back as a pilot through World War II, and he took a job. He was flying over the French coast to map it and check what was happening. And he disappeared. We know now almost for sure that he was shot by a German pilot. We didn't know for sure for many years, but I think it was in the 2000s, there's a diver that found a little bracelet with his name, Saint-Exupéry, and then they found the aircraft underwater next to Marseille, and the pilot that shot him, or at least that claims that he had shot him, is still alive. Would you believe? And he said yes. He said, "I'm afraid. I think it's me." And he was gutted that he had done that because, although he was a military, that was part of his job. Apparently, Saint-Exupéry was one of his heroes because he had read all the books and he just loved him as a pilot and stuff. So yeah, let me show you Saint-Exupéry. He used to be on the 50 franc notes. So tomorrow, when I'm flying home, I'm flying from Saint-Exupéry airport. Anyway, we are now in the old town, so that's the oldest part of the city. And in the old town, you've got those little alleyways called traboules. They are, a bit like this one here, you see. So most of them are private, so you cannot go. And those little traboules, they used to be very, very handy for the resistance because you have to know your way around to be able to use them because they go basically in between the buildings. And of course, the Germans, they had only been here, for a few months and stuff, so they did not know all the trouble as well. So the spies and the resistance, they could escape using those little trouble. Thank you, Sarah. Cool. So that's going to be the end of the tour. Let me know if you have any questions before we go. I'm just trying to catch up, see if I've missed any. Cool. Would I ever join Adam for a Jack the Ripper tour? No, Terry, I don't think we have. I don't think I have anything to bring to Adam. You know, he's a ripologist. I don't know what I could bring to him. Let me see. Well, will I be back here, Michelle? Well, so far it's not planned. I do have a friend living here, so I could potentially, but so far it's not planned. No. Maybe at some point. I mean, you know, there's a lot to see in Lyon, so I could probably do 10 different tours in Lyon. It's just that it's not that easy to organize when you're not, when you're not here, because I don't personally know the city very well myself. You know, I'm just a tourist. But yeah, let me see. Yeah, so the adjunct, her name is Virginia Hall. There's an amazing book, or biography. It's called A Woman of No Importance. And soon next year we should have a movie. So I'm hoping. Well, there's already a movie with Virginia. It's called A Call to Spy. Some of you might have watched it because we did a tour about another agent the other day. So she's also in the movie Noor Inayat Khan. But yeah, I think the next movie coming up should be very good. Hopefully. Oh, you have family in Villebois. I've never been there. Yeah, well, I'm not a professional. I'm not a trained actor, but yeah, I do. Well, I used to do stand-up and theater improvisation as well. Yeah. Right. Thank you, Edith. Thanks, everyone that was able to leave a little tip. Again, it's greatly appreciated. And if you don't follow me yet, you might want to give me a little follow. So you've got a follow button. It should be above the chat. And what am I up to next? Oh, Tuesday. I've got 2 tours on Tuesday. I'm taking you to Tower Hamlet Cemetery. So that's one of the Magnificent Seven in East London. Thank you, Elaine. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, David and Wendy. And I'm redoing Dark Tales of the Docks as well on Tuesday. So yeah, cool. I'm just gonna stay tuned another minute, see if I see any more questions. Thank you, Tish. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Margaret. Thanks, Yar. Thanks, Lisa. And yeah, if I ever, we never know, I might come back here at some point in the next year. So if I did, I will definitely do that tour again and maybe some more. Thanks, Andrea. Thanks, Nathalie. Cool. I don't see any more questions, so I'm going to get going. Have a good evening or a good morning, whatever time it is for you, wherever you are in the world. And hopefully I'll see you soon back in London. And bye-bye.